Welcome, everyone, to another Dulles Online Sunday morning. On behalf of everybody at DCC, I want to welcome you today. Feel free to say hello in the chat window. That always encourages everybody else. We're really happy you've joined us. And dads, happy Father's Day. Dads, don't underestimate your role, your influence, your voice, what you're modeling. Every part of you shapes those who are following your lead. If you haven't been a perfect dad, you're not alone. We're here to encourage you. To all the dads watching, we hope you have a wonderful Father's Day. And parents, our kids team wanted me to pass along to you that they have created a new DCC Dulles Kids channel. So they will be posting weekly videos for your kids to do crafts, have a story time, or other fun activities. Be sure to subscribe to Dulles Kids on YouTube and follow our social media updates for some fun events that are coming up. Thank you to everybody who gives at DCC. 2 Corinthians 9:11 says, "You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion." God's intention for you and me in resourcing us is so that we can be generous on every occasion. Your generosity, your giving is making a big difference here at DCC, so thank you, everyone. Hey, next Sunday, I have the opportunity to lead all of us in communion on June 28th, next week. I'll be leading at the end of my message communion. So be sure this week to have ready at home crackers or bread, juice or wine, so that you can participate in communion at the end of my message. I'm really looking forward to that. And be sure to invite some friends. If you're on our email list at DCC, you received a survey from us this week asking when those of you who live in the Dulles area expect to feel comfortable to gather back in person on Sunday mornings. Many of you replied, so thank you. While 52% of you said you'd be ready to go back now or soon with appropriate measures taken, 47, almost 48% of you said not yet. Most of that group said later in the summer or early fall. That matches what's being surveyed in churches all over the country. It's right around 50%. So here's our plan. This could change. It's not in concrete. In the month of July, we're going to be starting watch parties for anyone who would like to gather together in groups of 8 or 10 or 6. And then we will be prepping to start up gatherings again in mid-August. More to come on that soon. Hey, so if you have the same skin color as me, let me tell you how God is leading me in this world right now. DCC has partnered with North Point Community Church in Atlanta. And in regard to the racial pain that our country is feeling today, lead pastor Andy Stanley said something that so captures where my heart has been this month. I believe I'm going to actually include part of Andy's video with you in an upcoming Sunday message of mine here soon. One thing that Andy said was in reference to Lazarus, actually Jesus standing before the tomb of Lazarus. Before he did anything, before Jesus said anything, he stood in the pain that everyone was feeling. He wept. It was so moving that the people there commented on Jesus' grief. When you don't know what to do, particularly if you have the same skin color as me, for those of us who are white, and you feel like you might mess up or you might say the wrong thing, I'm just encouraging you, the starting place is learning from the voices around you, those who are hurting, those who are grieving, and feeling their pain. Jesus stood in the pain of those at Lazarus' tomb and wept before he provided them a solution. So I want to echo to everyone in our church family that this is the moment where Jesus' body, his church, should pause in the pain of the Black community and in the pain of our whole country. And before we offer solutions, before we offer ideas or opinions, we should stand in the pain. If you have questions, continue to let us know. If you want to be in conversations, learning the heart and pain of the Black community, continue to let us know. Also, I've been talking with a lot of my Black friends. Stefan Youngblood is one, Joshua Simonette, Alton here at church, about hearing more of their stories this summer. So they're going to be sharing with us more in the weeks ahead. And Alton and I are talking about a Bible study midweek in the month of July on the book of Ephesians about true unity and two groups of people becoming one. So stay tuned for more on that. Again, we're so happy that you're here with us today. Say hi in the chat window. Click the connect button for more information about DCC. And dads, have a great Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day! I love you so much. Thank you for being the best dad ever.
Thank you for stepping up and being my dad. I love you.
Happy Father's Day!
To the man that captured my heart first, Daddy, I love you so much. My life would be so different without you, and I hope you have the best Father's Day, and I hope you feel really loved and celebrated.
I love you, Dad. Happy Father's Day. I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad.
Dad, happy Father's Day. I love you so much. I am so thankful that I get to call you my dad and my friend. I love you. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
We love you. You're awesome!
Happy Father's Day, God and my daddy. Have a great day. Bye. Happy Father's Day.
Hi Dad, happy Father's Day. I am so appreciative of the way that you love me and Ken so well, and I am so thankful to have someone who teaches me like you do and who sacrifices so much for our family. You're the best, and I love you so much. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day. We love you so much. Thank you for everything that you do. You're the best.
We're starting this morning with a story to set up where we're going today. So a lot of you know that we have two girls. A lot of you know Mackenzie and Reagan, and they both came into this world in dramatic fashion. And I think for Amy, the word is traumatic. We had two pretty traumatic labor and delivery stories. So Mackenzie came into the world after 24 hours of labor. In fact, I think it was actually the C-section happened at like the 27th or 28th hour. And it was somewhere around hour 23 when Amy was just exhausted. Contractions happening regularly, but just it's like the progress stopped hours earlier. Her water still had not broken. And so a doctor comes into the room to try to figure out what's happening. And this was really awkward for me. I guess it was more awkward for Amy, I guess. I'd never been in an examining room like this before, where he is talking to us about what is happening. And he thought he felt what he said was the baby's foot. And he said to us, wow, okay, I think this is the baby's heel. This baby may be breech. And that was the last thing Amy wanted to hear. So the doctor said, hang on, I want to get a second opinion. So in just a minute or two, there are two doctors now standing on either side of Amy's bed, talking to her, talking to me about what they're feeling and what they think is happening. And the second doctor said, wow, this is not the baby's heel. We're feeling the baby's nose. And we said, nose? Like, that sounds unusual. Is that unusual? And they said, it's very unusual. This is very rare. In fact, you can't push anymore. And they explained to us that, this is really, really at risk for the baby. If Amy pushed, she would break Mackenzie's neck. And so in just, the way, maybe not quite TV show like, but there was a quick call to prep the OR. And before I knew what was happening, I was in OR medical scrubs. I was able to be in both C-sections, for both C-sections. And so I remember reaching the point after, Amy is exhausted, she's done, and now she is as anxious as I've ever seen her. And I'm trying to calm her anxiety, and I feel my own anxiety, and I'm trying to hide that from her. And I remember after asking the doctors and nurses as many questions as I could, just standing in the OR during the prep, feeling totally helpless. Like there's nothing I can do. There's nothing else I can say. This is completely beyond my control. And we ended up having a successful C-section, and that takes us to 3 summers later when Reagan was born. We had a very good, calm pregnancy and even C-section until the very end. Just as Reagan is being pulled up and out, we could hear her start to rear into that first cry. And as she was winding into it, it turned into an unmistakable gurgle, a loud gurgle that everyone in the OR heard, and it was clear to me, and then silence. And suddenly, there was silent, busy activity happening all around me. And within just a moment or two, baby Reagan is over here now to my left on a table, and I can see that she's turning blue. And there's no noise, there's no crying, and finally a nurse explained to us that she aspirated fluid. She aspirated birth fluid, and essentially it's like an infant's version of drowning. And so for the next 7 days, Reagan, little baby Reagan, lived in a tiny little glass box, like incubator-like bed with tubes and wires all in her and around her. And I think it was like day 3 or 4 of not holding her. Amy hadn't nursed her, where we didn't know what was happening. And I remember the doctor was a good doctor and was very focused on her work, but we had a little bit of a language problem understanding what she was trying to explain to us. And I finally just said to the doctor, what we're trying to ask is, could our baby die? And in her not intending to be blunt, but what really came out as a blunt statement was, it's possible. And that's essentially what she said. She didn't elaborate. She didn't ask us to sit down. She just said, it's possible. And in the next day or two, Amy was spiraling, and I was really trying to hold it together. And I remember again the same feeling, like here I am again. I just feel helpless. I feel helpless. And of course, our girls today are adult children who are a part of our church community, and we're so grateful for that. I want to talk today about the feeling of helplessness in this chaotic world of stress and turmoil and broken friendships and broken relationships and the anxiety that we have and that many of us know well, and how that helplessness, that sense of helplessness, can really go one of two ways. For a lot of us, for most people, I believe helplessness evolves into, really morphs into hopelessness, just a despair, just a total loss of hope. When what God intends for us is a surrender of our control. And those are two completely different experiences with two different outcomes. And that's what I want to talk about today. So welcome. I love that you are all joining us here online this week again. And if you're new, to those of you who are joining us new this week, we love having you. Welcome. We're into the series we're calling The Battle for Peace, and it is based on and inspired by Erwin McManus's book, The Way of the Warrior. And again, I got emails and texts from a lot of you this week just saying the same thing. Everybody says the same thing when they read this book, like, wow, this is really speaking to me. I think I'm experiencing God. And I want to say to those of you who maybe are not church people and maybe faith has not been a part of your story, I believe this book is as much for you as it is for people of faith. And I just want to challenge you to give it a chance to really help connect the dots to this idea of living in a broken world, a world of chaos, a world of disappointment and hurt, and there being a God who is the God of peace. Ultimately, the call is to see that Jesus was the final, ultimate step of our loving God to lead us back to Him and to life by fighting for us, by fighting for our peace. Okay, so I want to reread something that I read last week from the book, and then I'm going to jump into kind of a new thought this week that really has to do with us finding ourselves battling hopelessness at times and circumstances in this world. You cannot properly understand Jesus if you do not grasp that his entire life's purpose was to win the greatest battle of the greatest war that has ever been fought. God stepped into human history to fight for us. He did not hope for peace, he fought for peace. Sometimes the true mission of Jesus is misunderstood because he never carried a physical weapon in his hands. Yet if you want to see the true marks of a warrior, the kind of warrior that Jesus was, you need to look at the scars on his hands. In his death and his resurrection, Jesus took upon himself all the violence of the world so that he could bring all the world his peace. So what's ironic is how Jesus framed the experience of his tortuous crucifixion with the words to his disciples, his really sort of farewell words before his arrest and crucifixion, that he was giving them his peace, and then immediately following his resurrection, when he sees them for the first time, he goes right to the whole point of peace again. And it's so important that we understand this. I want to just reread these short verses in Scripture in John, because Jesus is telling us that his whole entire purpose for the cross, for his crucifixion, was our peace. John 14:27, Jesus said, "Peace I leave with you." Now this is in the discourse just before his arrest. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as this world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." I don't give to you the way the world does, thinking that houses are what will give us ultimately peace, or the better job, or the right spouse finally. I mean, of course, God cares about those things, and we can have peace in those relationships. But Jesus is saying, I'm going to give you peace by taking away from you everything that causes death, everything that causes hurt and division. A little bit later, Jesus says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. It's interesting that if we just heard Jesus say, in this world you'll have trouble, I mean, how discouraging is that? Like, that would be a total downer, because a lot of us are living kind of thinking like retirement is where I'll find peace, or the next job, the better relationship, when my kids finally start acting the way they should, when my kids get older, when I live in a different neighborhood. We keep projecting out that peace will come when this physical thing happens in the world. And Jesus is saying, in this world, you're going to find trouble. There's going to be heartache. There's going to be disappointment. Hurt people will hurt you. We say that often around DCC, that hurt people hurt people. In this world, you will find trouble. And that would be discouraging if that's all Jesus said. But he said, but in me, you will find the peace that you've always been craving. And why is that? How is that? It's because Jesus overcame. He's the only one who's overcome the trouble of this world. He's the only thing or the only one who's overcome the trouble of this world. That's his point. That's what Jesus says just before his crucifixion. And then after the crucifixion, again, I'm rereading from last week, and this is kind of to set the stage for what we're going to unpack today. After his crucifixion, he goes right into, this is John 19. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. That word fear, remember that word fear. The disciples are in fear because the Jewish leaders are trying to crush the movement of Jesus. So much so that the disciples saw Jesus, the leader of the movement, crucified. So they're terrified. They're together with the doors locked, terrified for the Jewish leaders. Jesus then came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." It's the very first thing he says to them. After they celebrate and are overjoyed and they can't believe it and they see the scars in his hand and his side, he says again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me to fight for your peace, to lead you into ultimate peace, the peace that you crave, I'm now sending you as my agents of peace into this world." And this is what God intended from Genesis, from creation. We were made in the image of God. We were made to be people in peace, living in peace and thriving in peace as part of the image of God. And when we broke the world by replacing him with ourselves, we tried to make ourselves God. That's really the early story of humanity. Jesus is saying, I'm not coming here to wave a magic wand over humanity and just make everything right. That's just not the plan. My plan is to work my presence and peace through you, through those who've experienced my reality. Okay, let's talk about what peace is. So what is peace? Is it just this sort of blissful thought that someday I'll have no more trouble, I'll be sitting on the beach, sipping margaritas, and life will finally be good, or my kids will finally, be off to college and out of the house? That's a sad thought for some people, and it's kind of a happy thought for others. Is it this kind of future thing that will happen physically in this world, and my circumstances will finally change and give me peace? This is what peace is rooted in. It's in the Old Testament Jewish idea of shalom. Shalom at kind of a surface level really was a farewell, a bidding farewell to someone. When you said goodbye to them, you would wish them shalom, peace. And it's really sort of a statement of God's favor. And this is more of the generic way of looking at shalom. It's a goodbye. In English, it's our way of saying, the word good in goodbye, like good be with you. It actually, goodbye, is a derivative of the original phrase, God be with you. We condensed down and compacted down, God be with you, into goodbye. And that's a kind of a surface level way of looking at what shalom means. But when we unpack shalom, like a lot of the ancient languages where the one word is so rich, it takes an English sentence or maybe even a paragraph in English to define what the word meant, shalom really met at the heart of its, the favor that was being expressed to someone was harmony, wholeness, completeness, prosperity. All of those ideas were wrapped up in the expression shalom. And so when someone would say, and when God would speak his heart for shalom, for our peace, when Jesus came to be the Prince of Peace, when Jesus came to be the ultimate peace that has no end, it is to be our experience of wholeness. When you find peace, you find wholeness. You're made whole. And shalom doesn't mean that you're at peace with your children, but you've got financial stress. Shalom means you have holistic peace. Your relationships are at peace. You're in such connection with God, you hear him and you recognize his promptings. You have a calm in your spirit about where you are financially. When there's challenge and circumstances and even threat, you have confidence in God as your protector. So it's this idea of wholeness, that we are who God intended us to be before the world was broken. Here's the problem. I think we all love those words, harmony and prosperity and wholeness. The problem is we live in a world where peace has some enemies, and there may be no two greater enemies of peace than worry and fear. Erwin writes about this, again, early in the book. We're still early in The Way of the Warrior. When Erwin says here, in getting into the idea of worry being one of the threats, one of the enemies to peace. All around me, I find, and this is Erwin writing, all around me I find troubled hearts, men and women drowning in worry. We have become so adept at worrying that we have created an endless number of names to describe the nuances. Whether we use the language of stress or anxiety or find ourselves in the depths of depression or despair, worry is the source of so much of our heart's troubles. Worry projects a negative view of the world around us. Worry projects a negative future. Worry is an act of faith. It is a deep-seated belief in worst-case scenarios. Worry is not rooted in reality, but does in fact affect our reality. I started this church in 1998-99 time frame, and I sent out a flyer to what was a very small South Riding, Virginia at that point, just inviting people, hey, if you'd like to come have a discussion or hear me talk about a different kind of church, a church that welcomes not just believers, but those who really struggle with faith or those who don't consider themselves people of faith, and making our church safe for them to ask tough questions. Come join me. And we had a little coffee mug on the flyer that got mailed out. And I remember, I was 28 at the time, I remember the closer we got to that launch Sunday, that first Sunday we invited people to, I just had a growing sense of this isn't going to work and no one's going to show up. And we started that year in the South Riding Town Hall. It's for those who don't know the area, it's a very small little community center. And I found myself that night before that, Saturday night, walking around. I don't even know if it was intentional. I found myself walking around the town hall multiple times, many laps around it. There's a swimming pool and basketball court in the back. I'd go around that, around the front, just talking to God, like, what have I done? I'm too young. I don't know how to lead a church. And got to this place of feeling sort of helpless, like I've made all the phone calls. Should I have emailed somebody else? And I remember that night, God challenging me to not see this as my church. And I really got to a safe place. I remember sliding down the basketball hoop pole and just sitting at the bottom of the basketball hoop that night and just saying, God, this is your church. If this doesn't work, then you'll figure it out. This really isn't up to me to have all the answers to. And I really did in my anxiety and my worry that no one would come. I let go. I just gave control over to God rather than letting my helplessness turn into hopelessness, which is where I had been that week. I would say that to Amy, nobody's going to come to this church. Why would somebody come to a little small church that has never existed before? Instead, that night, under that basketball hoop, I heard God's prompting clear enough that instead of spiraling into hopelessness, I surrendered my control to God. I intentionally gave my control over to his control. Erwin goes on to talk about fear. And this is, again, about a page over. He just so clearly addresses this. If worry wars against our peace, fear is perhaps an even greater foe. When we live our lives afraid, it creates turmoil and chaos within us. Fear is the enemy of peace. While worry will rob our joy, fear will steal our freedom. For what we fear establishes the boundaries of our freedom. What we fear has mastery over our souls. When we are anxious, we lose our strength. When we are afraid, we lose our courage. When we have found peace, when we found that wholeness of peace, we have both the strength and the courage to live the lives we were created to live. So here's the secret. Here's the solution. It isn't to try to be religious, and it isn't to just say, well, I guess God wants me to have no say in my life. It's an intentional surrender of control to God's control. And so I want to talk in these last few minutes here, how do we do that? How do we give control over to God in such a way whereas it doesn't feed our helplessness, but we know, wow, someone is actually in control and I have confidence in him. Paul, the Apostle Paul, says something in Philippians 4 that I addressed the very first week of quarantine. I was out of town in Winchester doing a wedding and ended up recording a message in my parents' backyard, which feels like 2 years ago now. And I taught from this scripture, and it's so relevant. I want to just reread it here for a few minutes. Philippians chapter 4 is where the Apostle Paul says, be anxious for nothing. And I remember I used to struggle with that so much. Like, I don't know that I've ever really mocked God. I mean, maybe in some bad moments I have, but this is tempting. Like, God, are you serious? Like, are you for real? Be anxious for nothing. This is God's instruction to us. I want to just read one more thing here that Erwin says that relates to this. I just thought this was so good. I know that what Paul means, Erwin says, what Paul means is that we should not allow anything to make us anxious, but the truth is that it is usually nothing. Paul says, be anxious for nothing. Erwin's saying it is usually nothing that is making us anxious. Our anxiety, our distress, our worry, when stripped to its very essence, is rooted in nothing, or at least nothing we can control. And man, that just resonated so much with me when I read this. We worry about things. We become anxious about things. Not nothing like our kids don't matter, or the stress in our homes, or our jobs, or our incomes don't matter. Not that kind of nothing, but nothing we can control. I've taught a few times in recent years about something that I thought God really spoke to me, 3 or 4 years ago, about the reality of the effect of anxiety. And what I said, and I'm going to just repeat it here, is that when our body feels anxiety, when you have stress, it is a physical sign of a spiritual reality. Stress or anxiety are physical signs that we have taken control away from God, that we are not leaving control in his hands anymore. We've actually taken control away from him into our own control. And that's what Paul's getting at here, and I want to just unpack this with you for a few minutes. Is God saying, so we're helpless, okay, so we just live in that? No. What he's saying is that Jesus came and he took our turmoil and division and broken relationships and the guilt of the past and all that rages, the war that rages around us in this broken world. He takes the anxieties that we feel and the challenges during quarantine and a virus that threatens the world. He's taken all of our inner battles to the cross. All of our chaos, all of our unwholeness, all of our separation with God. And then he died. He died with those things. And then came back to life having defeated all of them. What Jesus is calling us to and what the Apostle Paul is calling us to is that we trust that power, that kind of power. We trust his control. And so what I want to do here in making this practical here at the end is I want to take the next few verses of Paul and I want to read them in reverse order. After Paul says, be anxious for nothing, I want to go to verse 9 and just kind of in reverse order, kind of backtrack through what Paul's saying to help us put this into practice. And that's where he starts. Paul says in verse 9, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or whatever you've seen in me, put it into practice, and then the God of peace will be with you. If you want to walk in God's confidence and peace, no matter what you face, no matter what the trial is in front of you, if you want to be washed over by God's peace, then put these things into practice. So what are those things? This is what he says in verse 8. I'm backing up one verse prior to what we just read. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, right, pure, whatever is lovely, admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Think on the things that are good and beautiful, pure and right and good. And if you have trouble in your circumstance or your challenge, and this is something I had to learn years ago, and I'm telling you, if you're distracted in this moment right now, if you're pouring another bowl of cereal, or if you're kind of looking off to the side at something online, I'm just asking you to tune into this because this was a powerful moment in my spiritual life of Jesus becoming so real and practical to me. If you're in a circumstance that is overwhelming or filling you with anxiety or stress, or you're trying to teach your kids from home while also working, or whatever's happening, whatever the stress, whatever the threat, whatever the destruction or turmoil is, if you have trouble thinking on something pure or right or admirable or exciting or beautiful, you don't have to go any further than the fact that Jesus, the reality, the beauty, what's admirable about Jesus taking everything that disrupts our lives and causes chaos and hurt to the cross and putting it all to death. Think on that. Think on that in the circumstance or challenge or whatever seems to be posing a threat to you. Think on the fact that Jesus came back to life. Sometimes that's just my prayer. When I feel overwhelmed or there's something stressful or I don't know if this baby's going to live or I don't know how to understand what the doctor's trying to tell me or I don't know if anybody's going to show up at the church I'm trying to start. I sometimes have found myself, or often now in my spiritual life, in my relationship with God, simply saying the words, Jesus, you came back from the dead. If he has that power, he should be in control. In fact, I want him in control. I can't control this circumstance anyway. Erwin said this last week. Erwin said this last week. I read last week from the book, Erwin's words, the thing is, you ultimately do not have control over your life. Peace does not come because you finally have control or regain control over your life. Peace comes when you no longer need control. Peace comes when you no longer need control. Well, what do? We just act like religious people? We kind of fake our way through it? No. We settle in on the reality that Jesus came back from the dead. And if I don't know what else to think on, or there's nothing else positive in front of me, or I don't know where to settle my heart, I settle on that lovely, pure, right, admirable, exciting reality. Wow, Jesus, you came back from the dead. You put to death all of the things that hold me down and discourage and threaten me. And you not only put it to death, you came back from the dead. You have all power. You don't just perform miracles. You don't just have pretty amazing power in your hands. You have ultimate power, power over death. I want you to be in control. I want you to be in control of this circumstance. I can't control the doctors. I can't fix this problem. But you know the outcome, and you always turn hurt and pain. If I allow you to, you always turn hurt and pain into good and beauty. He really does. And that's been the story of my life. And Amy and I, we would say that from many years ago. Backing up one more verse. Talk to God about everything, the Apostle Paul says. Again, we're trying to make this practical. Think on what's good and pure and good and lovely and exciting. And you don't have to go any further than the cross and the resurrection. Paul also says, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all human understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Talk to God. Tell him what's freaking you out. Tell him what's stressful. Tell him what's threatening you. And give thanks for the power that he has over death. Set your mind on those things. And the peace of God will emerge. You will find yourself walking in peace and living in peace and breathing in peace. So, in addition to these challenges, talk to God. Tell him what's stressing you out. Be real with him. Tell him what you're afraid of. Then give him and tell him these things. Give him control. Give him control of the circumstance and give Jesus control of your life. Some of us have been playing church a long time, and you still struggle to find peace. I find some of the stories, Brad, encouraging, and I find this to be a very welcoming environment, but I'm still trying to identify the peace of Jesus in my life. And it may be that you've never actually surrendered control of your life to Jesus. You're trying to get him to fix this crisis that you're in so you can get back to real life. You're not going to walk in the peace of Jesus, like the reality of God's peace for your life and your future, until you surrender control, not just of the crisis, but control of your life to Jesus. Think on the amazing power of God coming back from the dead. Talk to him. Actually talk to him about what's troubling you, what's scaring you, what you're worried about. And you'll find yourself being anxious for nothing when you have confidence in the one who has control over everything, even death. I'm going to pray with you. Listen, I hope what you don't hear me saying is, hey, everything's fine. The world is a big happy place right now. There are serious challenges happening in the world, health-wise, in geopolitical sense, politically, financially. Obviously, I don't need to go through the list. There's a lot of uncertainty about the summer and about the fall and jobs. I'm not trying to pretend anything here. What I'm trying to focus us on and get us to land on is the real source of peace. Let me pray a summary of what we've talked about today as us putting this into action. Jesus, I think maybe I try to be religious at times when you're asking me to surrender control, not just in the scary moment, not just in the moment of anxiety, but you're asking me, Jesus, to surrender control of my life to you. And I'm encouraging you right now, where you're sitting, wherever you're listening, to just say those words as the movement from helplessness to surrender of control to the one who has control. Jesus, I surrender control to you. I give my life to you. God, I thank you for hearing us, and I thank you for using my words today. I still don't know how to explain how you do that. I feel like I jumble these words a lot, and I could have been clearer, but I'm trusting you with these words today. Thank you, God, for hearing us, and thank you for being a good God who pursued us to lead us back to peace. Amen. Hey, if you don't get regular emails or my videos on Facebook, I'm going to be updating you in the coming days and weeks about kind of our re-entry plan back to physical gathering. For those of you who are not in the Dulles area, we're going to keep doing this online. And we just want to invite you to continue to join us online. But we are starting to think about, in the months ahead, what it's going to look like to regather. If you don't get updates, just send us a comment here before you sign off. Click the contact button or the comment button, and say, hey, you'd like to be added to the email list, and we'll make sure that you're getting our weekly updates. I love you, DCC. Love doing life with you. I'll see you online this week.
As we continue on in our day today, we wanted to leave you with a prayer through a song. And I am making this my prayer this morning, and I think I speak for the band as well, that we want to make this our prayer, that we allow Jesus to be the center of everything that we do. When we walk, when we're resting, when we're waiting on Him, just asking Him to be our strength, to be what we need in each of those moments, because He will be. So as we end our time this morning, would you just make this your prayer as well? Whatever that looks like for you, it's going to look differently for each of us because we're all in different walks in our journey with Him. So let's just make this our prayer this morning. As I rise, strength of God, go before, lift me up. As I wake, eyes of God, look upon, be my side, yeah. As I wait, heart of God, satisfy and sustain. As I hear voice of God, lead me on, be my guide, be my guide. Above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me. Above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me. Yeah. Whoa, whoa, Christ be all around me. As I go, hand of God, my defense by my side. As I rest, breath of God, fall upon, bring me peace, bring me peace. Above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me. Above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me. Yeah. Whoa, whoa, Christ be all around me. Yeah. Whoa, whoa, Christ be all around me. Your death, your blood was shed for every moment, every moment. Your life, your death, your blood was shed for every moment,
Jesus, we ask that you just make that our prayer. God, that we would just walk in that as we journey on through this week. Just be in every part of our lives, of our moments, of our days. In your name we pray. Amen.
Listen,